Yo guys, what's up? Tim from Mastin Labs. In today's video, we are going to be using the Fuji Original Pack to save my marriage from divorce. Let's get into it. Okay, yeah, that was a little overdramatic, but hear me out. My wife and I got married last year, November 2023. We got married in Cancun. It was a destination wedding. It was amazing. But as you know, with venues like this, if you want to bring in an outside vendor, you got to cough up that dinero. You got to pay for them to get there. You got to pay for their stay. And then on top of that, you have to pay, of course, for their service. Then you also have to pay for the fee on top of that, the venue fee. You add all that up, things start to get a little expensive. We were already over budget. I don't think we can do that. So we chose the best photography agency that we could, that the venue already had, and we sent them some inspiration pics and we hope for the best. We get the images back, and needless to say, my wife was not very happy. So in today's video, we're going to be editing those and we're going to be saving my marriage. So let's get it started. All right, so we're going to be using the Fuji Original Pack from Mastin Labs today. And the preset that I'm most likely going to use on these is going to be Fuji 800Z. 800Z, when it came out, was a beautiful film. Because of its fast speed, it was great in low light situations, and it also had a fourth layer that was color sensitive that brought out some cooler tones, cooler colors in the actual film itself. Because, as you can see, I've got some oranges here, I think this film will work well for what I'm trying to go for here. Let's get into it. The first thing I want to do with this image is I want to crop it. 50% of the image is curtain. So let's go ahead and bring that in. And I'm thinking 4x5 vertical. And I don't need all that wall behind me. I'm going to get rid of that curtain now with my jacket in the background there. Maybe a little bit more so I can finish out that frame back there. Okay. All right, I think that's good. As with any preset, really, you want to go with a three-step workflow. We've got a three-step workflow. It's very, very easy. We're going to apply the preset, and we're going to see what it looks like after that. And then from there, we're going to increase the exposure. It looks a little bit dark. So what I like to do is sometimes I don't really want to guess where that exposure is. I will hold shift and double click on exposure, and that'll go ahead and have Lightroom essentially just kind of say, hey, this would be a good exposure. So for me, look at those highlights. They're pretty high up there, but I still got a lot of shadows around me. So I want to soften this up. I want to open it up a little bit. We've got a couple great tools for us to be able to do that. The first tool I'm going to use is all soft underneath our tone profiles. What this does is it's going to take the shadows to going to bring in some more detail, and it's also going to take the highlights and bring in more detail as well. I'm going to bump that up to 200. I'm really going to open it up, and even then, I think we can do more with this. So after that, I'm going to use one of our specialty tools called Strobe Soften. This is a really, really great tool that also will allow you to open up high contrast situations. It was really originally made for Flash, when you're using Flash to be able to soften some of those shadows that are created. But in a situation like this, where you've got a very dark room, you're standing right by a window, it's a great opportunity to be able to use this tool. So I'm going to come in with, let's just bring it up to 150 and see what that looks like. I'm actually going to bring up our exposure a little bit more since we were able to remove some of that contrast and kind of open it up a bit. Yeah, there we go. All right, so what you're looking at here is DNG out of the camera. Well, I guess it's not out of the camera, but you know what I mean. DNG, you've got the after. Let's just quickly take a look at what the original edit looked like. Okay, this is the original edit here. My wife wasn't super happy. Maybe she'll like the new one. All right, let's move on to our next image. First things first, I usually look at the crop. If I don't have the crop, sometimes it doesn't like hit me. And I don't really get to see a vision of what the image is going to look like. But I think for this one, we're already looking pretty tight. I'm going to, I feel like I've got a little bit more space above my head than I'd like. So I'm going to bring that in just a little, I mean, just a touch. Just a touch. Okay, I like that. Remember, first things first, let's get Fuji 800Z on this. Oh boy, looking moody, looking dark. I am going to increase my exposure. And let's see, I'm at, 1.2. Let's see what Lightroom thinks that should be at. 1.4. Okay, a little bit brighter. I'm going to open this up again. We've got very, very harsh shadows and light here. Using all soft, I can make that, and I can open it up here. And then I'm going to do the same thing with strobe soften. I'm going to see what that looks like. I actually like that. That looks really, really nice. And I think if we look at the skin tones here, maybe we bring in, oh no, look at that white. White's looking pretty good. I think from a white balance perspective, right out of camera, this was shot very, very well. And that's always nice, because when you get a good image straight out of the camera, it makes your editing so much easier. Literally, it could end up being a one-click edit. If you've got good exposure, you've got good white balance and good tint, you can get a one-click edit out of a preset. Usually that doesn't happen, but getting good stuff right out of the camera, very, very important. Let's look at a before and after here. I like it. I really don't think we need to do too much more to this image. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, simple. Let's do the same thing as we do. Apply the preset. Let's bump exposure. And because I still have some of these highlights, they're just a little bit much for me, I'm going to go ahead and just hover over all soft. Actually, now let me just go ahead and apply it. I'll apply all soft. And I don't want to go all the way because I like that bright highlight. I think we're going to go there. Man, I love the warmth that it really brings to the image. Of course, you're looking at a DNG, it's got no contrast, but man, when you look at something like this, I think it looks really good. Let's take a look at what the original edit looked like as well. A little bit desaturated. I still think it's a great image. Yeah, but I just think, when you add our presets, the fact that they're going to have that film color, and it's really, it's going to look great. I like it. Let's move on. All right. I feel like I am not actually standing up straight. Gotta nip that in the bud right now. There we go. All right. First things first. Apply the preset. Add exposure. I'm gonna say 1.9. Let's see how close I am to what Lightroom has to say. 1.6. I overshot. No worries. Again, dark, light. Let's soften it up. Let's use the tone profile all soft. And I'm going to go ahead and bump that to 200. Oh, let's see. Okay. Still, I want to open it up even more. So I'm going to go strobe soften. And I'm actually liking the way that that's sitting straight off of the bat. For me, I'm going to bump up that exposure a little bit more, just to bring in a little bit more light into the situation. Bang. I think that looks really good. Next. Okay. This is a tough image. I love this image a lot. Got all my boys around me, but it's a tough image. This top left here got a lot of open space. I don't really like the lampshades at the back. So right now, I don't know what I'm going to do with the cropping situation, but let's just dial in the color situation. Apply the preset. I am going to let Lightroom choose where it wants its exposure, and then I'm going to soften it up, get rid of some of that contrast. I'm going to leave strobe soften where it is now. And then what I'm going to go ahead and do is hover over orange reduction and see if I can't just get rid of a little bit of the orange that we see in the back with that wall color and then in our skin as well. I don't want to get rid of too much. I don't want to lose our beautiful faces here. Well, that's the original edit. Here's the film edit. I'm going to bump exposure a little bit more just to brighten it up. And then I'm going to bring in a touch more greens. We're talking the hair here. I'm going to leave it where it is now because I'm going to have to come back to this image and shape the light a little bit to give me something that, feels well balanced. As of right now, I think the color looks pretty good, but there's some things that are distracting me. So let's go ahead and switch it over to my beautiful wife. I really like this image here, but again, my eye gets drawn first of all to the fish, very much in frame, and also very, pretty sharp there from a focus perspective. Also, you've got the light over there on the left-hand side. So that's making my eye get drawn to that. I really want to be drawn to my wife, of course. So let's go ahead. And I'm thinking 4x5. And I'm going to come in a little bit and I'm essentially just going to get rid of that window and I'm going to bring in so I can just have a clean edge for the actual curtain there. Okay, so from here, let's apply 800Z. And then we are going to bump our exposure. Ooh. Okay, pretty close. It's quite warm, so let's cool it off just a touch here. I'll leave it at that for a second before we start changing too many things. Again, we've got a ton of contrast, so let's dial that in. Tone profile, all soft. And I'm really going to open it up. See, look at that detail that you just saw there. You can see way more detail in the shadow. You can see it in the back of her head with the hair. And then over here on the side of her face, as you open that up, you just get a little bit more. And we can actually dial it in even more by adding strobe soften. So that's what we're going to do. We just want to even it out a little bit. A little too dramatic for our tastes. The last thing I really want to do with this image, it'll be quick, but we've got this left side where we've got this curtain. It's essentially the same general kind of brightness that you have in the entire image, but you've got this darkness on the right-hand side. So I want to shape the light a little bit. So I'm actually going to go ahead and do a linear gradient on the left-hand side, just so we can darken that up a little bit, put more of the attention on my beautiful wife. See here. Okay. Bring down the exposure. There we go. All right, so for the last thing that we're going to do on this image, we're going to do some skin smooth. And now I'm going to go ahead and pop it on 200 and see what that looks like. You want something, of course, you don't want it to be unnatural. You want it to look really, really clean, exactly the way that it is. And again, you're in a room here where you've got a lot of harsh shadows and a lot of harsh light. Adds a lot of texture to a person's face, adds a lot of texture to a lot of stuff. You've got those shadows to take care of. So with that skin smooth, it really just smooths everything out while still looking natural. Of course, there might be a few other things that my wife would like to do, but I think as you just look at this image now, you look at that before and that after, it just looks a little bit more refined, a little bit more elegant. Let's move on to the next one. All right, so in this image, we've got my wife, her sister, and her mom. We've got a lot of space here. Top, I like the bottom, of course, because you get to see her dress, but of course on the right-hand side, you got a lot of curtain. So let's remedy that right now. We'll go ahead and, I was going to keep the same aspect ratio, but I think I actually want to make it a little bit, I don't know. Let's go add shot. I mean, if I really wanted to get rid of the curtain, that's making it feel pretty tight. Actually, I like that. I'll bring it down just a little bit so you see a little bit more of the train. I like the crop. Let's do the same thing as we always do. Let's apply the preset and let us adjust our exposure. I'm going to let Lightroom tell me where it wants to be. Okay. Again, you've got harsh shadows, harsh light. So let's open it up. All soft. Bump it to 200. See what it looks like. Man, it's a great tool. It's a great tool. Strobe soften, again, great job helping me even things out. I mean, we haven't really done too much to this image. Again, we just applied the preset. I bumped the exposure. I worked with the tone profile all soft, opening up those shadows, bringing more details to the highlights and the shadows. Essentially did exactly the same thing with strobe soften. And I mean, I think we're already looking 10 times better. I'm going to bump the exposure a little bit more. Yeah. And then skin smooth. Shooting in these rooms was tough. I'm not going to lie. I think the photographer did a really, really good job. We used an agency, so we didn't actually really get to talk with our photographer beforehand. There was a lot of talk with the agency, the coordinators, and we met the photographer for the first day. Is it the best? I think, it's nice to meet the photographer a little beforehand, talk about some things so that it's not all happening right there when a whole bunch of other things are happening. But I think the guy did a really good job under the circumstances. It was very, very rushed. We were in November, so the sun set pretty early and everything was super chop. And then when you got to these rooms, for her room, it was white and it was blue. For my room, it was that orange, that yellow that you saw. So it made it quite difficult, of course, with the lighting situation. You also have a lot of different types of light, as you can see from this image here. He, of course, put the lamp on in the background to create a little bit of separation between everybody's head, add a little bit more dynamicism with the light. But, I mean, look at the color of that light compared to what you're seeing from outside. That makes things a little bit difficult on the edit side, but the nice thing is straight out of the camera, if you take a look at that white balance, it's pretty spot on. That makes editing so much easier when you have good white balance and the temperature is correct. Now, you add a lot of different types of lighting, that makes it really difficult, but look at the dress, look at the skin tones, it's all right there. So you know what, that strobe soften, I'm actually going to turn that down a little bit. You got to be careful with all these tools. You want to, as you can see, it can really open things up, but sometimes you can also lose a little bit of that skin color. All right, so I just have to go on a little bit of a journey. I removed strobe soften because what I felt like was happening was I was losing a little bit of color in the image, a little bit of that dynamicism was starting to look a little bit too flat. So I went ahead and added it back on, but I just had it at its base amount of 100%. We go from 100, that's where it all starts. You can go up to 200 or you can go to 0. So I still think that the shadows are just a little bit too much. So I'm going to bump up our exposure a little bit because I feel like we still have a little bit more room on the highlights. Pardon me, I think we still have some room on the highlights. And then I'm going to try a linear gradient over here on the left-hand side. And I'm going to just see if we can't brighten up just a touch. I mean, we're talking just a little bit. Brighten up that portion of the image. Balance is key. we weren't really necessarily going for a dark and moody edit here. We wanted something a little bit more light, but the rooms, again, didn't really have, I wasn't super conducive to that situation. And that's okay, As photographers know, you just kind of have to do what you got to do in the situation that you're in. So I actually, the skin tones are looking pretty good. We've just got the orange from that light in the background. We do have a tool called Orange Reduction. I'm going to add that on. It's probably going to do a good job of removing that orange. Might do a little bit too much. Yeah, you can see you're losing a little bit there on the skin. So let's reduce the amount that is actually going to be removing from our image. And let's see what that looks like. Yeah, I think we need to maybe go to about 25. Just to get a little bit, get rid of a little bit of that orange, but without removing the life from their skin. All right, and I'm gonna see what it looks like to just cool it down just a touch. You're always experimenting. With every image, you're always experimenting a little bit. Oh, you don't want to over edit, so I'm gonna leave it where it is now. We'll come back to it in a little bit. All right, the next one. I'm trying to figure out what is the angle of this image here. Well, yeah, I kind of feel like that would be straight if I'm looking at the curtain and the wall in the background, but as you can see, that would just pretty much destroy the image itself. So it looks like that is simply just not going to happen. So let's just go add shot, leave it at that. It's not as contrasty here from a highlight and shadow perspective, so that's nice. Let's go ahead and add 800Z. Let's open up the exposure. Whew. Let me just let's do Lightroom here. Yeah, definitely gonna need to open this up. All soft as we have been doing here. And then from there, I am going to also do strobe soften. See, where can we bump that? Let's try 150. Let's increase the exposure just a touch since we were able to save some of those shadows and bring out a little bit or lessen those highlights just a touch. Okay. And I think as far as the skin goes, it's looking quite natural. I think with her sister there, she's a little bit further to the back. You've got the light that's on her there. You've got that shadow, so that's making her a little bit more of a contrast than I would like in the image. But one thing that might be able to help out with that is doing a little bit of skin smooth. So let's see what that looks like. Didn't help, of course, too much. Didn't help on our skin, on the contrast there, but definitely on my mother-in-law's arm, you can just see it just smooths everything out. Let's see what the yeah, I like. Let's move on to the next one. Beautiful shot. It's interesting. It kind of has that, that teal and orange vibe that used to be super big back in the day. So let's go ahead and apply our preset. Adjust our exposure. Okay. Yeah, as you can see, you've got those highlights there. So Lightroom doesn't really think that there needs to be too much of a bump there. But again, I think that needs to probably be somewhere around there, maybe. All soft. Bump it. Strobe soften. I don't want it too much. And then we're gonna bring down the exposure a little bit. I think it looks better. I think it looks a lot better. I think the tough thing here is you just have this orange, and then from the light that is going to be behind her left. And then you've got daylight here coming in on the left-hand side, kind of in front of her. And you're going to have some shadows from the back. And I think that light is also bouncing off that couch. And so you're kind of also getting this blue shadow, this blues in the shadows here. So I'm going to bump up our temperature just a little bit and just see what that does to the overall image. You know what? I was actually thinking that was going to bring out too much orange. So when I'm looking at it now, you can definitely see that we've reduced some of those blues down there at the bottom. I think this looks a lot better. I'm going to continue bumping the temperature, and then I'm going to use orange reduction to kind of stamp down on that warmth, so it doesn't look crazy. So basically, I'm about to solve for the dress itself, and then with the skin tones, I'm going to bring that down using orange reduction. So if I'm looking at the dress, I think that looks pretty good. Now let's do orange reduction here. Oh, dang. All right, so we're at our last image here. I love this image. I think everybody here's got such a great smile. Everybody is so happy. It's beautiful. So let's get into it. Let me just make sure that I'm fully reset. Okay, cool, we're good. 800Z, come out and play. Exposure, let's bump that up. And then what we're going to do is we're going to all soft, open it up a little bit so we can have just a touch less of that contrast. Yeah. Yippers. And then let's go ahead and do some strobe soften as well. I mean, you guys, I'm doing this for the first time, so you're watching me make decisions on the fly here, and potentially even having to go back and make some other decisions depending on how everything goes. But I'm kind of liking this. It's, I think the skin tones are a little cool. You got a lot of blue in there. So let's go ahead and warm things up a touch. If we look at the original DNG, let's look at the after. I think the light's flat. That window is right behind them. So we're getting flat light on them. Using strobe soften is of course going to soften all of that contrast. And if it's already flat, then as I'm looking at it now, I feel like I'm missing some shape and some contour on the faces. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to undo the strobe soften. I'm going to leave it where it is now. I'm then going to increase my temperature, which is what I had done after the strobe soften. And then I'm going to do skin smooth. We might play around with this image here. We've got a couple other tools here. We've got light and area assist, which I don't know. I'm going to show you exactly what it looks like. Let's see, where am I? I said skin smooth. Getting lost in the sauce over here. Okay, I like it. I think I'm actually going to bring down the warmth, just a touch. And then really I'm looking at their skin tones here. Yeah. I'm going to try I'm going to go, everything here is off script actually. So I'm going to continue with the off script. And what we're going to do is we have some AI tools here. And one of the tools we're going to use is light and area assist. If you're looking for a light and area, did you see that? Did you see that? That looked great. It just opened up the background in it's like subtle but not subtle. And I think it removes some of that darkness from the actual image itself. Now, of course, this is probably going to be a stylistic thing. And who's going to be the judge of that? Of course, my wife. But I do feel as if opening up the background a little bit, you start to see just a little bit more separation, especially on the right-hand side here with my sister-in-law's hair. you get lost with the shadows there as it goes from light to dark. So I think opening up the background a little bit gives it a little something something. Now, do I think I might have opened up the background a little bit too much? Potentially. On that left-hand side, I'm starting to become a little bit distracted over here. So I might lower that a touch. And I think we still have some room on the overall exposure. So I'm going to bump that up just a little bit as well. I think what I'm also going to do is I'm going to crop in. I'm going to try a 4x5 here, just to remove some of this extra noise that we have. And by noise, I mean the stuff in the background. You got to keep the most important things in focus. Horrible crop dog. I don't know. You ever just get this pained expression while you're editing? Not because editing is horrible, because there's so many decisions to make. I like that. Bang. Okay. Let's run it back. Always an important thing to do when you're looking at your images. We've gone through 10 images. We've edited them with Mastin Labs Fuji original pack using Fuji 800Z. And what we're going to do here is we're going to first look at the original DNG. Then we're going to look at the edit that they did, the original edit. And then we are going to look at my edit. I think stylistically, my wife and I are looking for something that is, true to color. We want something that is true to life, and film does that. And I think Mastin Labs does a really, really great job at taking those films and representing them in presets. The nice thing is Mastin Labs has got great tools to be able to dial that in. Orange reduction is one of them. Even the tone profiles help you dial in that color, because you're either adding detail to the shadows or the highlights, or you're removing detail from the shadows of your highlights, and ultimately being able to provide less of a contrast for some of your images. Those tools came in clutch for me. They really helped me able to open up the images a little bit more, so we had less of a dark and moody, less dramatic feel to the images, adding a little bit more life into them, removing that fade that they had, and ultimately bringing a little bit more true to color and true to life. So I hope you enjoyed this. I certainly hope my wife is going to enjoy these images, and I hope that you wish me luck on the rest of the edits. Thank you very much for joining in. This has been Tim from Mastin Labs. I appreciate your time. Have a good one.